Here we go. I'm down as hosting, I think. Daniel, do you want to do
it? Sure. Right.
Moderate. I don't mean host. I mean moderate.
Yeah. Welcome everyone to the Flux developer meeting. Today is February the 17th. So far, we just have one agenda item, which is from last meeting. Stefan asked if we could move this meeting later.
For my benefit primarily.
Right.
Yes, because what time is it there in Kingdon?
5 a.m. I think we had actually resolved that we weren't going to do that, except that this time, if we moved it, I wouldn't be able to make it. So.
Okay. What's the time when you can make it? So 2 hours doesn't work for you.
2 hours later would generally be fine, but today there's a conflict.
Oh, okay. So actually, it would be okay to move it, just since we're already having this meeting today.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, we're a bit of a self-selected group now that is making the call on this. I think I would just send an email to the mailing list and ask people on Slack again, just to see if there's people who sort of relied on the earlier time, just to make sure. But I think in general, yeah, no objections from my end.
Yeah, me neither.
Super. What else? So there is a couple of open to-do items from last meeting, or discussion items at least. Let me catch up something about the 0.8 release that has happened. A prominent note in the docs about this. I'm not quite sure if this. And Scott wanted to get something into the next Flux monthly update newsletter. Okay, that looks good. Something about image automation, migration. Oh yeah, okay. Something between Scott and Michael being resolved. Yeah, super. I mean, this all looks good. I had a very small thing. I brought it up on Slack already. We discussed it yesterday in the cluster add-ons meeting as well. The question if we want to participate in Google Summer of Code. So Hidde or like was this concern that it might be a lot of work, the mentoring. On the other hand, like I think we're a bigger group now. Lee also has mentoring experience. If there's something that is sort of, a nice and round project that we could offer in the summer, I think that could also bring or involve new folks in Flux again. And what I found interesting was that getting the outside perspective of somebody who wants to start developing, like somebody who's new and who goes through the docs and doesn't quite understand what's going on. So getting that experience might be helpful as well. So we're still very, very early on. Like I think right now the CNCF is still applying with Google, so it's not quite clear that Flux would be part of this at all. But I'm mostly just throwing it out there to see if you feel like there would be a project.
What are the deadlines, Daniel? Do you
know? I'll dig them out. Timeline summer of code. Yeah. So the organizations, they are involved until early March, then until mid-April, the students apply, and then mid-May, they sort of start with the community bonding. So loads of time. Like I think we can, so I mean, this would all be after, incubation, fingers crossed, and probably a GA announce. So it would be all after this. So maybe there's something, maybe there's some consolidation or some tidying up, or maybe some docs or something that is, I don't know.
We could ask Lee if he would consider doing it again, because he mentored Santochi, didn't he?
Yeah.
And I think both of them had quite a good experience with doing that.
For sure. Yeah, okay. Shall we just all have a think about this again and then revisit? Good.
Yeah.
I mean, everybody who's in these meetings knows this already, but I'm wondering how publicly we discussed the GA release and the planning that is sort of going on. Do we like? I think the wording we used was like we've reached feature parity now, so the code is more or less all there, and now we're doing testing and fixing docs and fixing bugs. Do we need more help, or should other people be involved there? Do we need more feedback?
It's an interesting question. There's two different milestones there. There's feature parity, meaning you can now use this in place of Flux v1, albeit you might have to do some work to do so. And then there is GA, and those are not necessarily like, it seems reasonably obvious that comes before GA.
Yes.
But by how much, we may have other ambitions for GA. And there's stuff like we would probably want all the APIs to be a beta version, and the image APIs. Stefan has mentioned this before. The image APIs are still alpha, and there's a few things to figure out there. I don't know what other stuff we would want to wait for. Maybe just a certain amount of time for, as you said, sort of bug fixing / to be confident that it is not only feature parity, but has actually had some time to prove itself in production systems. Stefan, thoughts?
Hey,
Stefan.
I want to change the roadmap today. I've seen some confusion on GitHub discussions, and yeah, it's my fault. I've marked the image update feature parity to 100%, but I didn't add that downloading image layers to look up timestamps is a non-goal of that particular milestone. So I'm going to update the roadmap, add that as a non-goal, and link to the discussion or an issue. We have both for that. And what I want to do is, can you look at the roadmap page, please?
Mm-hmm.
So the roadmap page starts, in our planning discussion, we defined 3 tasks. All of the above constitute Flux 2. So I would move this introduction under the road to Flux version 2 and say all the above constitute Flux v2 and add a new section here, the road to Flux v2 GA, and add there some things like stabilizing the image update APIs, testing, and so on. Some broad tasks that we want to get to until we say this is GA. And how we say this is GA could be, I don't know, Flux v2 100 as a tag, or Flux v2 200 like linkerd2 did, or whatever. It doesn't matter how we tag it in the end. It's we should tell people that we have feature parity in the roadmap, but we haven't arrived at GA yet. So we avoid things like, hey, is Flux 2 GA? Is Flux 2 ready? I've seen it in Slack, in GitHub discussions all over the place. So I think we should make it very obvious in the roadmap that GA is next on our list, but is not there yet. And we have here the road to Flux version 2. I would say the road to Flux version 2 feature parity with 1. So, and that's done. We mark that. Now we are on new milestones around GA.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. And thanks a lot for updating updating the roadmap document. What I was wondering is if we should have like a little announcement or something asking our users for feedback or for more testing, or basically so we can be more confident.
So we've announced 08 on Slack, and that's it. We need to write a blog post about it. Hey, we arrived at feature parity. This is what feature parity means. It doesn't mean GA. This is where we want to look at next, stabilizing the image update APIs. In order to do that, we should ask users to try it out, give us feedback, link to a couple of discussions and issues which are very important in taking the decision of what to do with the image APIs. There is the source ref thing that's very different from everything else. There is also the issue around how you do that for multi-clusters. Do you use customized prefix to create unique policies per cluster, or you want to have some other things in the image update API to restrict the updates to some local paths, only to some YAMLs? I don't think that's a good idea. I think people should use prefix and so on, but we should definitely discuss all of that and invite more users to give us feedback.
Definitely.
So I have a blog post, like the typical monthly blog post would go out on 1st of March. If you want, we could move that earlier. But I think that would be because I'm writing the blog post anyway, we could also put a request for feedback, request for help, something in there, and everything you just said. So
I think first we should, in that blog post or separate blog post, let's say a single blog post, we should announce, hey, we got feature parity. Please, if you are a Flux V1 user, please try this out. This is the status of the image update APIs. This is what we are doing, and so on. I don't think we should wait till the end of the month to write it.
Sure. Okay, we'll make it a separate blog post.
If we do one now, will there be stuff to talk about in March, or does that not actually matter?
It doesn't matter. Like,
okay.
I think we can still point to that blog post. Like, I mean, there's other things we always mention, like upcoming events.
We'll have a bunch of things till March in Flux too.
It'll, yeah.
Well, big things already merged, which are not released in 08. It will be probably 081, 082, whatever.
Sweet.
So yeah, I'm not concerned we'll not have content for the March.
Okay, so I'll start the work on this blog post now.
Yeah, so you could take my announcement for the 08. That should, and we have to add links to each controller changelog. So people, I only posted there like important features, but it's not the whole story. Flux 08 comes with many more things than what I wrote there. And so maybe we can link directly to the controller changelogs, and I think in the blog post we can do that. So I said, I don't know, some feature, and in parentheses there is let's say source controller. On that source controller world, we can add a link to the source controller changelog, and people can actually see all the things.
I think I would do that in the. Well, I was thinking we would just do a short blog post where we say like feature parity. Here is what it means, and here's what we need from you. That we tell people, or give them the links to migration docs and all the stuff we want them to try out.
Okay.
So we just do one like this, and then like describing all the features that have been added with change logs. I think we can do that in the March blog post. What do you think?
There will be an overlap. Like half of the things we shipped in 08 are work towards future parity. For example, being able to connect to a Git server with self-signed certs. That's something that came up as a blocker for Flux V1 users. Lead Git to Azure DevOps support in the image update controller. That was also a blocker for a lot of people using Azure DevOps and Flux One image updates and so on. So the thing that we added to customize controller, where you can specify base style variables, that's also something driven by Flux One users. So I think in that blog post, the feature parity, we should mention, hey, we checked all this.
I think we lost your microphone.
Ah, yes.
Stefan.
Stefan, can you say something?
Can you hear me?
Yes. Yep. You're back. It was just the last sentence that went missing.
Oh.
Somebody remote muted you. We don't know who.
No, I have problems with my internet. It switches from one line to another.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so first let me make a pull request for the roadmap. I'll ask everyone here to take a look at it. I think we should update the roadmap before we publish the blog post and link from the blog post to the roadmap. And yes, Daniel, if you can start the blog post document, I'll help with links and anything I can.
Super, I just created the document. Excellent. Yeah, I really like that we're going to have like a constant, like every 1 or 2 weeks, we should give people an update and keep informing them like it's happening soon. So I think this blog post is going to help as well. Super.
Yeah, and the good thing is that we actually have new things a bunch of new things every 2 weeks.
Yeah, we don't have to
Man.
cast about for things to mention, do we?
Yeah. Another thing I want to discuss is I've been looking at the migration guides, especially the one Michael wrote on image updates. And I feel that there are so many good things in here that shouldn't be targeted to Flux V1 users only.
Yeah.
So many good things in here, and I'm concerned that someone that starts with Flux version 2 will never look at this doc.
Yeah. So maybe an example where I kind of did follow through a bit on. I had a similar realization, and so I split out for instance, how to set up your build system.
Yep.
And I'm sure there are other examples. I agree. We can factor those out because a lot of them are just almost standalone how-tos that happen to be useful for this particular thing. Another one is redoing the secret to be writable.
I mean,
I'm sure there are others.
Redoing the secret, for example, should be in the automate image updates to Git, in the prerequisite, in the install Flux section. That's totally missing from there. And we tell people, hey, you should use token or run the bootstrap again, but your solution is way better than run the bootstrap again. You can keep it as it is and change the key and so on. So
yeah, and it might be useful for like rotating the key or something.
Yeah.
If you want to switch authentication or it's more general. You're right.
Yeah, but even if let's say we just copy paste and adapt some things from the migration guide to the general guide, I don't think it's that bad, even if we duplicate some stuff. But
no, I mean
the target is different. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, I think for a lot of things you can just it will be almost an optional extra in most places, so you can just point at it and say, if you're in this situation, go here and then come back. And have it as a standalone thing, because people might just want to do it standalone anyway, or be doing their own thing and figure out, oh, I don't know how to do this thing. How do I do that? And then we'll have the guide to doing that just by itself. Do you have an idea of, are there other things, other parts that we could factor out of the migration guides?
For example, also when I read the migration of the image updates, some things are worth mentioning in the main migration guide, because this explains, for example, overview of changes between V1 and V2, right? It should be also on the migrate from Flux V1 and improve that, because I wrote that like super fast over the weekend or something, and this one is better structured and gives people more context than the main one. So
it'd be nice to be able to sort of transclude stuff, by which I mean have it in one place and then just include it in two places mechanically. I don't know.
Yeah, that's going to be a bigger concern when we want to do different cloud-centric guides. Like if we want a guide that shows you everything you need to know about Azure integrating with Flux.
Yeah, really good point. A lot of it will be common, won't it? And then you just sort of step out and do the platform specific bit and then come back to the bit that's in common with everything else.
Yeah. Yeah, maybe the new docs website could help here, since we are no longer, we will no longer use this MK docs. Hide will do it.
Are we just using Hugo?
Hugo, yeah.
Okay, yeah, we probably can do it with Hugo.
Yeah, Hugo has some ways of including bits of markdown in all pages and stuff like that. Maybe we can use that or something similar. But in the meanwhile, I will just copy paste some very good things from the image update automation to.
Sure. I mean, maybe
Migrate.
fence it with comments saying so that we know to factor it out later. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I also want to discuss the topic of dealing with incidents. I've added to the image update guide a section on incident management that, like, the moment people were trying this out, they came up with all these questions like, what I'm doing if I have an incident, how can I roll back an image? How can I stop image updates from writing to Git because I know there is something really wrong in Git and I don't want anyone to touch it and so on. So I put it here, but I think this is a larger topic where Flux 2 improves the situation so much over Flux 1 just by the fact that you can, I don't know, suspend reconciliation for just an app or just a Helm release, which was impossible with Helm operator. You had to stop everything or none. And now we have all these, flags, or how you want to call it, the suspend flag, also for things that are doing reconciliation, but also sources. So there is during an incident, you may want to pin let's say a Helm release to a particular version, or you want to say, I don't want any Helm upgrades to be run on my cluster. If you don't want on a particular namespace, let's say, if you want to stop the reconciliation, then you'll suspend those Helm releases. But if you want to say, hey, I want to freeze everything, then you will suspend the source of those Helm releases. And even if new Helm charts arrive there, source controller never pull them. Right? So there are different things that you can jiggle with while being on an incident. I don't know where was the right place to write all of that. Is it in the Helm guide? Should be like something incident management, a dedicated guide and link from everywhere.
I think it's a bit like migration in that it's cross-cutting across all the different bits, but it is a specific topic. Operating. It occurred to me when I was writing the migration guide for the image update that I wanted to go on and write, okay, once you've done this is how you do all these other things, like, pausing it or whatever, but I had to kind of stop somewhere. But yeah, having an operations guide for everything would be really useful. It's basically a lot of just common how do I kind of questions, isn't it? It's like, how do I pull the handbrake on the whole thing? How do I stop a particular thing? Or what do I do if I'm in this situation?
And especially about rollbacks, because with Flux 1, I talked to users that were having all sorts of scripts that were manipulating the image HTTP API of Flux. Like, it's a fluxctl release command that calls some API, and they weren't happy with Flux release, so they wrote their own stuff. But the end goal in the end is the automation deployed something, that something failed. We discover it maybe 10 commits afterwards. 2 days later, we want to restore back, but only not the whole system, because so many things during those 2 days were added to the repo, other deployments, other stuff. So you cannot just pin to the old Git commit because you roll back everything.
You lose all the stuff, yeah.
Right? So you want only for that particular app. Now with Flux was very hard. Flux 1 was very hard to do that because an app was just a container and an image tag, right? now you can bundle your app in a customization, or you can bundle your app in a hand release. So it's easier to undo only that app. That means container image along with its configuration. And yeah, I mean, there are users that have figured out on their own how to do that with Flux 2, but I feel like it's not that easy. So we should explain it better.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, I would put that as something that falls between feature parity and GA even. It's like right operations guides. And it's also something where Flux shines. I mean, this is what you've been saying, Stefan, something where we're not really showing people how much better Flux 2 is.
So what do you think are those operational guides? So let's say incident management, it's a big topic out of that. Other things are like what? Upgrades?
Yeah. The stuff I thought of for image update was more to do with incident management. It is, how to pull the handbrake, or how to stop one particular thing while letting other stuff continue. So stuff that's already covered in that link you just posted, largely, and how to do some things that are in Flux v1. There was sort of some primitive collaboration bits, like you could lock something and say, this is now locked, right? And this is bound to be something people want to do. Of course, you would just do it with a commit now, but explaining how to do it is important.
So yeah, right. Flux locking is basically you would suspend a particular image policy. Oh,
yeah,
you cannot suspend it.
No, you would have to. In fact, can you even do? You would have to put in a semver or basically something exact.
Yeah. So it's like revert image updates from here. That's exactly what I'm showing here. Like you have a range of semvers, then say, oh, I want to lock on a particular version because the latest one has a bug. So instead of having a range, I just specify that.
Actually, just thinking about it, it's a bit indirect to do that at present. So basically, you'd have to put in a regular expression that only allows that one thing. It'd be better to just have an exact match.
Yeah, but it works. Like you can.
Yeah, you can make it work. Yeah.
Select semver and you select an exact match. If you do that, it'll.
Oh, always... for semver, yes. I'm thinking of for other things. If you're using Calber or something, you would have to do something different.
Yeah, I
see what I mean.
I should write that also, because it works the same for Calber. You just have to remove you have, instead of having a regex that matches something, you just put the exact match in the regex and it will always get that.
Exactly.
So we have the means to do that, but it's not obvious to users.
It's a bit indirect and not very obvious. Yeah, that's right.
Okay, so yeah, I'll definitely add the regex stuff to the incident management here, and then I'll try to create an issue around what we discussed around creating these guides for operational across not only image updates but all the other things that we.
Yeah, and I think like with migration, it sort of deserves its own navigation category, doesn't it? It's, right. It's basically getting started / installation, migration, and operations. And there's some of the things will be references, some of the things will be how-tos or tutorials. But it's useful to have them categorized that way, I think.
Cool. Should we schedule for next time to discuss only the image update APIs, or have, I don't know, a dedicated meeting around it. I mean, to make a plan on how we move forward with
Sure. Yeah.
V1 beta 1, because there are many moving parts,
Yeah, there are
decisions to make.
Yeah, lots of discussions that are sort of a bit stalled at present. Yeah, good idea. I'll put that in for next time.
Okay, so for me is first make the roadmap pull request, and then improve the image update guide with how do you roll back when you don't use Semver.
Yep, may even be worth making something in the API for that. If we're thinking about changing stuff between alpha and beta, you can imagine just switching it around a little so you can have a pin which pins to an exact thing just for that purpose, because it's almost important enough to have its own field. But arguably.
Yeah, this question that came up this morning is super relevant to what you said, because people are saying, hey, I've been using FluxTL release. What's the equivalent now? And now you have to deal with Semver ranges or regexes to achieve the same stuff, because you cannot just tell the image update controller, hey, pin to this.
It's a good point. Yeah. And it's really roundabout trying to do that now.
It's still one command, flux create image policy, but you don't just give it the tag. When it's Semver, you just give it, but when it's regex, yeah, it's not as nice as Flux release.
Yeah, and you would effectively have to create the policy and then do a kind of one-off update, because the way that release works is it just updates it everywhere it sees it, and it's very difficult to make something that would do the same.
No, so I'm thinking about the FluxTL release equivalent only if you have defined an image policy before it.
Yeah, but you're right. I mean, it all deserves discussion. It's like, is that a useful thing to start off with? It is if you're using CI to drive your updates. Yeah,
I'm guessing these kind of topics come from people that are running FluxTL in CI.
Yeah, exactly. Which is a legit way to do things. For sure. I have to bookmark that one.
Yeah, I didn't wrote an answer yet. I'll try to answer it from the image update pinning perspective, like for an incident management, how you would do a FluxTL release from that perspective, but it's not the same stuff. So yeah, we should definitely discuss more here what the right equivalent will be, or if there will be none, and this is the new Flux 2, and this is how you do it. You have to define image policies for everything in order to pin.
Maybe if you've got, well, I can put this in the discussion probably more usefully, but if you've got the Git repo right there, i.e. you're running in CI, then maybe it's useful to actually just have a command that will update it in place.
Oh, we can do that if the marker is there, right? We can just...
You can certainly do it if the marker's there, yeah. But even if it's not, you can go through, you can just write a pipeline to do it, potentially.
Yeah, I mean, if we use KYAML in Flux CTL, then it's quite easy to parse the deployment name and find the image and update it, even if it doesn't have the marker. But
yeah, I mean, it will work. It will be not quite as, it'll be the same as Flux v1, where it can only do it for things it knows about. But that might be all right, or it might be okay to put the markers in and then run CI against those. That might be acceptable.
Yeah. Yeah, I totally forgot about FluxCTL release that doesn't quite care about automation. It works outside of automation.
Effectively, yeah. Yeah. I think for that, we need to strip it back to what are the use cases for that. And they are probably going to be about driving it from CI.
I thought about this a little bit. I don't really have completely fully formed thoughts about this yet, but about how you might want for those image decisions to be based on something other than just the latest. Like the best example I can think of is if your flagger canary fails and you want it to, the state right now, it kind of leaves it in a failed state. Maybe you want that to result in some sort of pinning or temporary pinning until another release comes along. So at least the Git repo reflects the current state. So there might be some weight assigned to each image that the controller knows about, and the weight would be decreased when a flagger canary fails. So like I said, this is not a fully formed thought, but I've been thinking about this too, how image automation could do some more advanced things for specific use cases.
That's interesting. And that suggests to me, maybe there's integration between Flagger and the image automation stuff that might be useful to think about. Like that interaction that Kingdon just mentioned, which is if you're driving it from automation, like a canary, then you might want to, if it fails, pin to the version before and then leave it there and tell a human about it. That's a really interesting idea.
I mean, Flagger could definitely do that if the image policy is just in cluster, but it isn't. That's the challenge, right? The image policy is in
not
Git.
always.
So yeah, I mean, it's trivial in Flagger to handle the rollback and say, hey, when you do rollback, if there is this image policy, pin it to the old version, and it uses client Go like for everything, and it will change it. But then customized controller will reapply the state from Git, and it will undo the Flagger change. So Flagger, instead of changing the things in cluster, should call something like the image automation controller and tell that controller, hey, do this commit for me. The old version failed, pin it to this version.
You'd want to drive it the other way around almost, wouldn't you? It's like have the policies be driven by Flagger and then tell the automation to run.
Where this idea originally came out of was I started to think about what could we do for people who have a really dumb CI image build process that actually can't produce increasing numbers. And they only have a latest tag, and maybe they have the Git SHA, but they don't have a way. So you could add a lot of smarts to the image automation controller. You could make it aware of when it first saw each image in index. So this doesn't get you the same sort of automated behavior of Flux v1 out of the box immediately, but once some time has passed, say you're keeping track of the date stamp of each image that you've seen for the first time. Now you see a new image. You haven't done a pull on each layer of each image, but you do have some information that would lead you to a place where you could say, this is actually the latest image now.
Sure, but the timestamp is gone the moment you upgrade Flux or your node goes down or whatever.
If you store it in memory, there's still a lot of limitations to this idea. Yeah.
And it will fail the moment you restart a pod, the image automation pod. That's why we have a storage and it's not in memory, it's on disk, but it's in a volume. And if that volume is not a persistent volume and is not by default, you have to do your own thing to make it persistent, then you'll lose all that information. And I'm not sure we should tell people to run Flux as a stateful set. I really hate that idea. Stateful sets come with so much operational pain. And if we make Flux a stateful set with all its controllers, like source controller should be a stateful set, image automation controller should be a stateful set, and so on, it's horrible. Like, it's so hard to deploy it. And it will restart so hard. Like on EKS, it can take like 10 minutes to mount a volume into another pod for some reason during some times. And imagine like your whole CD thing fails because it waits for a volume mount. I found that unacceptable. So I would resist any kind of feature that implies persistent storage for now.
Yeah, it's also a really expensive, whether it's a kind of operational burden of having to run persistent stuff, or it's just the complexity in the code. It's a really expensive feature, and it ends up not being terribly reliable. Like, we had problems. In Flux v1, we wrote it to use the build time because that was kind of what we wanted, but it wasn't quite what we wanted, and it had flaws. Like sometimes you can rebuild something, but it doesn't get a new timestamp because actually it's already cached, and so you have a new image, but because it's essentially a cached image, it doesn't get updated.
Yeah, so you have a new tag, it doesn't have a new timestamp, but it's appeared in the index for the first time.
Exactly.
So that's like an example of something that this half-baked idea could help with, except it won't ever have perfect information because it would have to pull the index and
you'll have aliasing for other reasons
about it. And
you'll get aliasing.
It's
like
not a stream.
What if two tags appear in between poles? And also things can, even if you manage to do it quickly enough, that never happens. Sometimes builds happen out of order. Like, this build got restarted, but there was a commit in the meantime. So the latest build is actually a commit behind.
Or builds complete out of order.
Or backport.
Yeah, or just that, exactly. Yeah.
Or CV backports, where you will publish the latest version first, then you'll start backporting to older versions, and those older versions of that app will end up as newer versions in the container registry because they are pushed after the latest. And that will like definitely mess up your whole production system. You'll be dumb because you'll be deploying a very old version with a backport. Like, no, I'm Kindle, I'm not. It's not addressed to you, but I'm not for any kind of feature that relies on random timestamps in the container registry. It's like flawed.
Yeah, it'd be better to let people establish their own order, and if they can't do that with tags, then maybe we can get the scanning to refer to something else. Like a Git repo from which
that makes the most sense.
Yeah, for sure. Yep. Okay. That discussion is now my tab in focus. So that's the thing I'll go back to when I finish this meeting.
We have 5 more minutes. Want to discuss the customized V4 things. I don't know if you've seen the issue. So a long story short, customizing kubectl is blocked for 1 year or more because yeah, there are cross circular dependencies or whatever. So in order to unblock customizing in Kubernetes, what the customized team did was they removed all the dependencies on API machinery. That means it only works with KYAML. Whatever KYAML bugs have, it will affect all our reconcilers, including Helm controller, because now even Helm controller does customized build if you use post render. That's one thing, and yeah, it's more about looking up, coming with good issues to the customized team and pinpoint the bugs in KYAML that we find. But the second breaking change is quite impacting to everything. HashiCorp GoGetter was removed from customized source code due to its 1,000,001 dependencies. Like if you depend on GoGetter, you'll download half the internet, and you also get licenses. So it depends on other packages that are licensed under some license that's not on the CNCF list. And for those reasons, GoGetter was purged from customized. What that means is you can no longer say, hey, I want to reconcile something from YAMLs, which are on a GitHub release, and those YAMLs are bundled into an archive, because GoGetter was able to fetch tars or zips. So GitHub releases, you can either do it with zips or tars. And GoGetter gave you a nice URL format that you could say, download for me this archive, extract these YAMLs. Right, and then Customize will use that as a remote base. So that's gone. Also, S3 is gone, and many other things that GoGetter knew about. In my mind, what's really affecting us is the fact that you can no longer pull stuff from GitHub releases. So I don't know, getting the Flux controllers definition, cert manager, so many controllers out there. The YAMLs which are in Git in the main branch or some branch, they are not the YAMLs intended for production deployment. Those YAMLs are in the GitHub release, on the GitHub release page, along with the binary and other artifacts meant for production use. And my suggestion, my solution to this is to create a new type of source in source controller that will be, and source controller will be able to fetch these stars from GitHub, GitLab, or Artifactory, doesn't matter, somewhere where you host these archives. And so that source controller will treat it like an S3 bucket or whatever. There are some things out there, there are YAMLs inside an archive. I should be able to pull them out and then make them available inside the cluster. So
is there a reason to do it as a no, actually, sorry, backing up. I think I've misunderstood something along the way. So before, where did you supply something that GoGetter acted on? Because the sources at the minute are just Git repos, right? So you can't, where could you do things that were tarballs before?
So all our examples are with remote bases.
Oh, as in you use customizations that refer to a remote basis.
Yes, and customized controller will calls out the customized build package. The customized build package has a dependency on GoGetter. It finds, hey, I have to fetch this YAML, is not here locally. So it doesn't come from source controller. It's somewhere on a HTTP address. I'll go get it and place it in the working directory.
And how would you do it with a source controller thing?
So
you would have to couple your config to source controller, essentially.
So in source controller, I would create a new source type called, I've talked to Hide and he came up with this name, remote file collection, where you give it an array of URLs that can be tars or directly URLs to YAMLs from whatever, GitHub release or whatever is there. And then source controller will pull all these files and make them available as an artifact inside the cluster. That's my solution right now.
And then how does the user use that? So instead of using a base that is a GitHub release, they do what?
So instead of adding those URLs to the customization.yaml, those URLs will be in the remote file collection custom resource. And then in your customization.yaml, you refer to those files locally because they will be locally. They are fetched by source controller, cached, and so on. So it's also a major improvement for the in-cluster reconciliation, because once you have Git URLs and HTTPS URLs inside your customization.yaml for these remote-based fetches, they happen every time you run a customized build. And you have hundreds of those. You'll be doing hundreds of TCP connections outside of your cluster instead of using source controller that caches them, and you can set a high, a rapid reconciliation loop in customized controller, for example, or in Helm controller without having to download everything every time, right? Also, if let's say GitHub goes down for a couple of minutes, a customized build will fail because it can no longer fetch those YAMLs. But if those YAMLs are fetched by source controller reports that, okay, I cannot go to GitHub anymore, but customized controller will keep applying the last known state because it uses the source controller cache. Right? So I see a bunch of improvements by just offering people a way out of using customized remote bases and replace them with the source definition.
Okay, right. So if people were using remote bases because that was their way to access the thing, then they could just use that thing directly as a source. Okay, but it doesn't, like if someone was using a remote base because they thought that was the best way to be able to check things locally, for instance, then they can't do that because Customize doesn't do that anymore. Yeah. Okay.
Yes. For example, our Flux 2 release process, if I update the Customize action, GitHub action that we used before, it's all broken because it
drags in all the releases, doesn't it?
Yeah. And what we did, we didn't use SSH to pull all those YAMLs, because then a Flux install will take 5 minutes because it needs to clone all our controller repos twice, once to get the CRDs, once to get the deployment YAML, because Customize will do a Git clone for each entry in the resource. So if you have the same Git repo, but different files, it will do a clone for each one, of course, because
so you need to just explicitly download the tarball and expand it locally and then refer to it, perhaps.
Yeah, that's what we are currently doing in Flux 2 release cycle. We use the tarball, we download that, we take the CRDs from there, we patch them, whatever Flux install needs to do, and that takes like a couple of seconds. If we switch back to SSH, it will take 5 minutes, and I don't want to do that. We'll rewrite our release process in such a way that we don't rely on tars, but we'll publish the CRDs as a .yaml file and the deployment as a .yaml file in the release, so we can actually get them with no SSH. but there's not a solution for our users. We can do that because we control all our controllers repositories. We wrote the pipeline, we can change it. But if people, for example, are using Customize today to install, I don't know, Cert Manager or whatever, they cannot just go to the Cert Manager repo and say, hey, instead of a tarball, now I have to change it to .yaml or whatever, and have all the YAMLs in your release page and so on. So that's why I'm thinking we have to offer something in source controller so people not lose this capability of fetching tars, which I find was a nice feature in Customize. That's now it's gone for other reasons than it's not okay to download tars. It's about licensing, dependencies, and totally different things, right? It's not that the future was wrong. The how it was implemented is incomplete or whatever.
How will the versioning work? Like with a Git source, you follow a version. Will that be the same with remote archives?
No. You have to change it by hand.
Yeah.
I mean,
you can just get latest, by the way, if you follow redirect and it's a GitHub release.
Yeah, that's yet another thing. Instead of coming up with this generic remote file stuff, we could have a GitHub release type. And if we have a GitHub release type, then of course we can follow releases. We can do all the things.
You can do just tags or sembers or whatever you like. Yeah.
We already have that code. It works for Git. It will work the same for GitHub releases, but that's a GitHub only thing. While fetching tars from external sources is something that Customize was able to do.
Sure. I mean, yeah, you could make it. You could make that part of the CRD maybe. Say, by the way, this archive is a release, so follow the releases, or this is just a fixed URL.
Yeah, but I'll try to write a proposal, create a discussional proposal for this topic. But I think it's something we should do for Flux users that are like us, relying on tars from releases. I think we are not alone in this.
Shorter name would just be archive or remote archive, maybe, if you want to. Yeah.
It's a collection, right? It's not one archive.
Oh, you want to have more than one? Okay.
Yeah.
Archives.
Yeah, but then you can no longer do a plural in the CRD. So that's why
it's archives is archives. Yeah.
Yeah, I kind of like what he does, like collection, and then it works collections, and that's it. Archive collections. Yeah, naming is hard. We can
naming is hard. Yeah.
Discuss it. Yeah. Okay, we are way over time.
Yeah. Daniel, closing statements.
Yeah.
Have a great day, everyone, and see you next week on Thursday.
Great. Bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.